What's going on, guys? Just give it one sec. I should be. Let me just check my YouTube to see if I'm live streaming. All right, we're good. So, what's going on, guys? KingSithis here, and I am here with Boris. He was in my comment section a couple days ago on my latest economic calculation problem video, which is the impossibility of socialism, understanding the economic calculation problem. And it seems like he had some issues with my video, and he basically wrote down some of those issues in the comment section. And I'm not the type of guy to argue with people in the comment section. So when I see somebody challenge me in my comment section or come up with an argument, generally I just message them and be like, "Hey, you want to come on and have a debate or a discussion?" And he messaged me back and he said that he was willing to have a discussion. So here he is. Introduce yourself, man.
Boris. I'm about 20 years old, a bit older, but I'm from Europe. And yeah.
All right, cool.
I am also at uni, to say that. So
what would you consider yourself politically?
Politically, like I always said before, I'm more of a social democrat. It's something that is, I guess you're in USA, Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess that's something that's not big there. It's more of it's sprung out of the socialist movement, but it's more like a liberal, more conservative form of it. So not the typical take everything away from everyone and the shit you usually consider socialist. It's more like, yeah, we are a democracy, but we also want to care for our people.
Yeah. Like I would, like how I look at like social democrats is they're not like full on command economy socialist. They're generally like, we support free markets. We just believe that the government should come in, regulate it, and have some sort of like welfare system for the poor, or take over certain parts of the economy that you feel are like monopolized, like healthcare or something like that, right? Is that a good?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good argument.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and I would more consider you guys to be, because I'm an anarcho-capitalist, so I would consider you guys to be kind of like socialist, diet socialist. You know what I'm saying? So when I look at socialism, like I look at capitalism as being on one side of the spectrum, and then communism is like full on command economy, and then somewhere in the middle is like you have like socialism. You know what I mean? And there's like degrees of socialism. So the more that the state is basically controlling the economy, the more socialism or more socialistic that it is. And the less that it controls the economy, the less socialistic that it sort of is. So you're kind of more, you're more socialistic than a Republican would be, but you would be less socialistic than an actual like socialist.
On your definition, yeah, but I would disagree with that definition, because socialism isn't really about who owns everything. It's more like it is about who owns everything, but not in a state versus people sense of way, but a company versus people kind of way. Like in a more capitalist society, you have more big companies that compete with each other, and in a more socialist or communist way, you'd have more like the family business. They still can work for their money, but they own their own stuff. They don't work for a bigger company. They don't work for a bigger conglomerate. So It's more about, you hear that often thrown around, it's more about the means of production and who owns it, and less about who owns the money, who controls the money.
Mhm. Yeah, so the thing that I see with that is socialism to me is just sort of like the more of an economy that is being controlled by a singular force, you know what I mean? So
Mm.
when you have it doesn't just necessarily encompass the the state. It could just be a group of people that or another criminal organization. But generally, I believe the only real way in which you can functionally take over an economy is through a state. I don't see any real way um, that you can functionally, voluntarily take
Mm.
over like the means of production through the proletariat.
I'd
Like the
argue
only way
more.
I could see it is that it's like some sort of state coming in and doing some sort of redistribution.
I'd argue more about, at some point, if a company gets enough power over a country, over a certain piece of land, it kind of becomes a country. You've seen that historically with like the colonial companies. They were granted charters. They were companies in their own rights, but they more acted like countries. So to me, the natural progress would be like, you started as a country, a company, you get more and more power, and at some point, you need to care more about your own security. So you establish a armed forces, you establish a policing force. At some point, you don't want other people stealing your stuff. So you establish strict borders.
Mhm.
And at some point, you go through that process of from a company to a country.
Well, I mean,
So
oh, sorry, thought you were
you
finished.
can have a company that is a factual monopoly, and at that point it becomes the state. But you can also have many companies forming an oligarchy or a technocracy, so a cooperative state in a
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. So the difference between say a company and a state is that the state does not is not deal in voluntary transactions, whereas a private company, let's say the very example that you came to light that you just gave came to light, where like a big private company, or let's say an insurance company, they basically buy up a bunch of land and they hire private security for the area to, and then they have people who like work there and then they protect those people for a fee, and on those people, the person who is the owner or who controls the company is the got that land through voluntary transaction um or original appropriation and got all that stuff through voluntary transaction. Well, then that's not a state. That's just a corporation. That's just a company. And yeah, I mean, you could call it a country. I mean, I guess it depends on how you define a country. I mean, is a country just a large landmass that we just sort of name, or is it specifically have to do with a state? I mean, if you're defining it the first way, then yeah, I mean, you could call it a country if it's a big land. If they own a large landmass and they name it something like Sithis land or something like that, then yeah, it would be a country, but it wouldn't be a state. And the reason why that would, and the reason why that is because a state isn't a group of people that is coming up to you and providing you a good or service in exchange for the goods and services that you own. What they're doing is they're taking control over land, they're claiming over land, and then they're saying, hey, you have to pay us, and if you do not pay into our system, then we are going to forcibly extract your wealth in order to fund our system. And that's the problem that us anarcho-capitalists have with a state as opposed to, say, a private company.
Yeah, but a private company can do that too. You can have a large area where you have places for your people to live, and you build a hospital in there, so you have places where people can be born. They can leave. You can also leave a country voluntarily. If I don't want to live here, I can move to another country. That's no big problem. But the same I don't say the company is a state. It more acts like a state. So at some point you can't really make the differentiation between those two, because they basically act as the same way. A company can still come at you with their own police force. They can still tell you, well, you live on our land, either you leave or you give us all your money because you live here and you haven't paid your living fee. Or they can just forbid them from leaving. They can just imprison them. In what way would that be different to a police force imprisoning you for not paying your taxes?
The difference is a private property owner. If you don't pay the fee to stay there, they could say, "Hey, you can leave," or they can find some way of getting wealth from you if you choose to stay there. But there's a difference between a state and a private company. Again, a private company is a group of people who are providing some sort of good or service in exchange for other people's goods and services or money, so that they could sort of make a profit. And that's sort of the idea of a company, behind a company. Whereas a state, they're not really in it for any profit motive. Well, they may be, individuals within it may be in it for a profit motive. The idea of a state is that they're going in there and they're not purchasing land. They're not getting it through original appropriation. What they're doing is they're saying, you people within this land, they're claiming over a land, and they're saying you must pay into our system, even if the people there are the owners of their own land. So that's a little bit different. So if you're on a private company's land, the worst that they could tell you to do is to leave their land. Whereas a state, even if you're on your own private property and you aren't on their land, they can still extract wealth from you. And a private company can only take money from you if you've used their services, whereas the state can take your money even if you don't even if you don't use their services.
Well, like I said, if a company becomes big enough that people are born inside on the land of the company, then that would make no big difference. The company can say, yeah, you own like sector A quarter 8 of our land, but they reserve their right to just expel you from there. And just so has a country the right to expel you from your land. If you agree with that, that's another thing. But in theory, most countries can, through some legal form, throw you out of your own land. And
You mind
so
if I say
could
something
a
to that real quick? So the
yeah.
only way, and I don't mean to interrupt you, the only way in which somebody would have the right to expel you from their land is if they are the owner of that land. If you own your own land and you're off of that company's land, or that person who owns that company's land, well, then they can't tell you shit. They can't take money from you. They can't tell you anything. Um, it's only when you live on their land and use their services that they own that you are then you are obligated to pay them back. Whereas a state, even if you don't want to use any of their services, even if you're not on their land, they still forcibly extract wealth from you to pay for things that you don't even want or even use.
Yeah, but the country also gave you that land some rent, and so does a company if it becomes big enough. They give you the land through a contract. So, yeah, but they also acquired that land beforehand. So what stops a company from using force to make you give up your own land, give that land to another person, and give them a contract saying, yeah, you own that, but we reserve the right to take it from you. So does a country. A country just takes land through historically, it's been, yeah, and also today, through war, through colonization and stuff, and they just give the land to their people, but they reserve the right to take that land back from the people. And so can a company. They can just have a police force. They can come to your door, say, "Hey, bro, I think you should sell your land to us, but we will give you rights to own that land. In parentheses, own that land." And yeah, what stops them from that?
Well, ideally, in a free market, there would be other competing firms that or insurance companies, or the fact that that person also in Ancapistan, there would be nothing, or in Ancap society, there would be nothing stopping that person from also owning weapons and guns to protect their own land. So, in a mature market, ideally,
Yeah.
there would be multiple different competing firms in that. So if one decides to take the land of the other, that other firm would sort of come in and protect them. And, that's sort of how it works. Kind of like how with certain countries, that can ask you the same question. Oh, well, what are you going to do if, France invades Poland? Well, the thing is, Poland doesn't invade, or France doesn't invade Poland. And the reason why that is because Poland has a military. And because there's competing militaries in multiple different countries, and they have signing agreements with other countries, right? That if one guy invades another country, then they will jump in to help that person that's being invaded. It could work very well the same way with, say, like multiple competing private companies. They could sort of sign agreements with each other that if one slips up and does steps over a boundary, then the other competing companies will come together and sort of stamp out that thing. But I think we need to hit on the fundamental issue, which is how is it that we come to own things? So let me ask you something. How is it that you come to own something? Like, how do you how do you come to own something? Yeah.
Um, how exactly do you mean that? Like, how do I get to own something?
Yeah. So like I own this cell phone, right?
Yeah,
How did I what do you think is the just way to come to own something?
through a contract.
Through contract? And what do you mean by
Yeah,
contract? You mean like I give you this for this, like
through a transaction.
voluntary
A
transaction,
transaction.
correct?
It doesn't have to be voluntary. I can put a gun to your head. Say you give me 1,000 euros, and I give you the phone, and either you die or we make that transaction.
Yeah, but would
Would
that
it
make you
really?
the owner of that phone though? Like
Yeah,
let's say I said,
but
"Hey, take the phone," and then you took it from me. Would that make you the owner?
we still had a transaction. It
Well,
wouldn't
yeah,
be
we did have a
voluntary.
transaction,
We,
but would
but
that
we,
make you the
but
owner?
we, um, it depends. Ownership is just a concept we made up. Mm, I can take your phone. Does it mean I am the owner or you're the owner?
Yeah, so
I
how do
own
you
it as
determine? Well, let me rephrase my question. How would you determine who's the owner? Like I'm asking you your personal ethics here, right? So
uh
if I were to come up to you
whoever.
with a gun, or you to me with a gun, and you were to be like, "Hey, sit this, give me your phone," and I'd be like, "Whoa, bro, here, take it," and would you say that you are now the owner of the phone after you stole it from me or took it from me by force?
Mm, that would be something controversial because, like I said, ownership is just a concept we made up. And I own the phone as much as you do. You own the phone at that moment. I own the phone in a more theoretical way. Like, it belongs to me. I bought it. I have all my memories on that. But at that moment, I don't have it. You own it in a more material way.
Wait,
So
okay. So
there's
ownership. Do you want me to define what I mean by ownership?
uh
Because
yeah.
ownership would mean to me, what I mean when I say ownership is the right to control a scarce resource. And a scarce resource would be like, like again, like a cell phone. I like me and you can't both do two things with the cell phone and then walk away with each other. It's one phone, right? So one of us in a conflict, like let's say I want to use the phone, you want to use the phone, only one of us can be the one to exclusively control the phone. So ownership is the right to have exclusive control over a scarce resource.
Well, the right isn't something that you can really define because
I can
you
define what I
can
mean
you
by
can
right.
no, let me talk really.
Oh,
You
sorry.
can have another sense of right than me. We see it in conflict. We see it in, I don't want to get geopolitical here right now, but we see it in Russia and Ukraine. Russia says, I have a right to that land, but Ukraine says, oh no, I have that right. So who is really right in that situation?
Well, neither.
Well, exactly, neither. And so if I make you buy a phone of me through force, neither of us is really right in that situation to own the phone. Neither I am right to own the money, or I have a right
All
to
right,
the
wait, wait,
phone
wait, wait.
because I gave
Hold
it up
on.
to you, and you don't have the right to own that
Respectfully,
phone.
respectfully, hold on. So you're meaning to tell me if I were to come up to you, pull a gun on you, tell you give me your cell phone, you would be like, oh well, it's yours now. Nothing I can do
No,
about
no,
it.
the other way. I make you buy that phone off of me.
No, 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 no.
We
Listen to the
go through that
hypothetical. No, no,
phone.
no. I've come up to you with a
Yeah.
gun. I say, give me your phone. And you give me your phone. Now am I
Yeah.
the owner? Like, would
Um,
you just be like, okay,
in a
take it. Yeah, you're the owner now.
in a
You would, and
in a
that's okay.
legal way? In a legal way, no. In a more material way, yeah.
No, I'm asking you your opinion. Would I then be the owner? Would you just say, okay, go ahead, take it?
In my opinion, ownership has two components to it:
Yes.
a legal and a material way.
Okay, so legally then, let's speak legally then.
Legally, it's mine,
Okay, so
and
you
you
would
took it from me.
not just be like, it's okay, whatever, it's your phone.
Yeah, but at some point, if you put a gun to my head, or I put a gun to your head, I can't really resist.
No, no, no.
And the
I
same,
understand that. What? No, no. We're talking about the concept of ownership. We're talking about. I
yeah.
understand that if I pull a gun on you and force you to give me, you're going to give me the phone. What I'm saying is whether or not it's ethical to do that. Like, would it be ethical for me to be the owner of that thing, or legally speaking?
Legally, no.
Legally and ethically, but I would say legally, it should be illegal for someone to take someone's phone and be the owner of another person's phone when they stole it from them. Correct? Would you
Yeah,
agree with me on
yeah,
that?
yeah.
Okay. So anytime someone takes something from another innocent person unconsensually, we think that that should be prohibited, correct? Illegal.
Yeah,
Okay. How does the state get its stuff that it's in possession is of?
through law usually, or yeah.
So are you meaning to okay, so I'm asking you, is that a consensual transaction between me and the state when they've asked me for my taxes? Like, could I go up to the state and say, "Hey, I don't want to pay taxes."
You use their stuff. You use a police department. You use the streets, and
How did they get that
so
stuff?
through the taxes you pay.
Okay, so did they ask those people politely, "Hey, can I please get that money?"
That's part of the social contract in living in a
I
country.
never signed a contract.
It's a social contract. It's not a
I never signed a
contract
contract.
you. It's not a contract you sign. It's a contract you do by being born in that. You can refuse, but in the end, the country has the monopoly on violence, so it's called. So they can just make you do it, and
Oh,
so can a
that's
company.
okay.
So could a company, though?
No, they can't. They wouldn't be a company.
Yeah,
That
they
would be a
can.
criminal organization.
Yeah, but what stops a company from becoming a criminal organization
Wait,
at
wait, oh,
that point?
wait. How about this?
If
Let me ask you this. Let me put this to you. If a company were to come up to you and say you need to pay into our system, would they be a company or would they be criminals?
uh, both.
So they would be criminals. They would be a criminal company, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say the state comes up to you and says you need to pay into our system. If not, we're going to kill you. Are they criminals?
I don't think they will kill you, but
You
in a
don't think they're going to kill
sense,
me if I don't
I
pay
don't
my
think I
taxes?
don't think I don't think they kill you for not paying your taxes, apart from the fact that
So what do you think is going to happen if I say, I don't want to pay taxes?
you go into prison.
And what if I refuse? What if I fight?
They make you go into prison.
I
In
say,
the
no, I
end,
am not going. And I got a gun. I'm not going. What's going to happen?
they make you. You can't really resist a force of
Okay,
like
so they're going to
50
kill
people.
me. So they're going to kill me if I resist.
No.
They're going to shoot me.
I mean, in the US, it's probably
In any
different,
country, pretty much any I mean, any country. The police. You think the police are just gonna sit there and just, he's got a gun. I
no,
gotta walk the other way.
they can make you comply through non-lethal senses. They don't have to shoot you.
Okay,
They
so
can
they're gonna.
just come-
So instead of killing me, they're gonna enslave me. They're gonna kidnap me. So it's not that
they
bad.
will put you in the prison.
Yeah, so they're gonna kidnap me. So it's not as bad.
Hmm. What? Yeah.
Okay, so what do we call people who kidnap other people?
What do you mean that?
What do we
I
call
don't
people who kidnap other people?
Kidnappers.
Yeah, but what are? Come on, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I get that you may want me to say that they're criminals. But,
Yes!
Like
There we go.
I said, it's part of the social contract.
It's not. I didn't sign a contract. I never signed any contract.
It's not a contract you sign. It's a concept. It's not, you don't have to think of it as a real contract. It's a concept, a theoretical concept.
So it's okay for the state to be criminals or to do criminal behavior.
It's okay to for a state to act in their own interest and their own rules that they set up. If you agree with those specific rules, is up to you. You can go to a country that doesn't accept tax, that doesn't take income taxes, that doesn't take VAT, and all that stuff.
Well, wait. What if I choose to stay? What if I say I'm not leaving? So whatever the state does to me, basically, you're saying it's okay because the social contract deems it okay.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Because you voluntarily decide to stay there. You voluntarily decide to use the state's resources.
Got you. So the Holocaust was consensual.
How do you mean consensual?
Like they could have left, right? But they chose to stay.
No, they couldn't. They couldn't leave.
They were leave?
Prohibited from leaving. They were prohibited from leaving.
So it was impossible for them to leave.
They were made to leave at first. So they
okay.
They had
so
let me just
so the ones that decided to stay.
Let me please
go ahead. Sorry.
At first they were told, yeah, you have to leave, but they really quickly rolled back on that. Many did leave. That's why the US has such a big Jewish population. Many did leave, but many stayed behind because they thought, well, it won't be that bad. And at some point, they weren't even allowed to leave anymore.
I get that. So the ones that decided to stay, right? What happened to them? They had it coming because they decided to stay, right? Under the social contract.
I don't get your point right now.
What I'm saying is that you're saying that whatever your argument that you made earlier was basically, hey, if you choose to stay in that country, whatever that country does to you, you're basically consenting to because you have the choice to leave. So I said, okay, well, what about the Holocaust? The Jewish people who, they could have left, and then you even admitted to me, hey, they could have left in the beginning, and some of them chose to stay. I was like, okay, so under your logic, they basically were like they had it coming, basically, and that the social contract deems it okay.
under that logic, yeah. But at some point, the population doesn't have to follow the social contract. If a majority of the population doesn't accept the social contract and revolts against that social contract, that's the reason why revolutions happen. You've seen it in France historically, where the population rose up against their king. They beheaded their king because he couldn't fulfill their social contract. They rose up and made their own republic. That's a thing that can happen. That's why I said it's not a contract. It's more of a social. It's more of a theoretical construct. The people are accepting those, to you, criminal procedures of taking their taxes, of making them go to prison and shit. I just lost my point there.
You're saying that if and tell me if I'm wrong, what you're basically arguing is that that if you have a majority of the people who live within that country, then they can basically void the social contract if a majority of the people within that country don't support what the state is doing. Is that what you're trying to say?
If they reclaim their monopoly on violence, yeah, that's why you don't see stuff like North Koreans rising up, because they don't have their monopoly. They can't rise up because they're so occupied with not dying through starvation that they can rise up. And you see that all the time. A state can become evil. I give you that point. But a state doesn't have to become evil. A state can be overthrown before it becomes evil. Historically, you mentioned Nazi Germany. They had the option before to not go through that all. But they chose not to, and then they had it coming from them. There were warning signs. There were many warning signs, but they chose, and they chose actively to prosecute millions of people. And I don't think that was a good thing.
No, I get you. I get that. But okay, but here's the issue with that. What if the majority of people is okay with people violating other people's rights and don't void the social contract or don't rise up against a monopoly? But
that doesn't make it morally right, but in a re-own our country right of sense, it does make it right to them. If you have to differentiate a how do I say that?
well, I would argue that people do this all the time.
That's what I meant with my comment with my English skills, because right now I want to say something, but I don't know how to express it.
Well, I would say that people do this all the time. So, for instance, like eminent domain, people aren't rising up against people who are getting their buildings snatched up by the government. People aren't rising up against people being thrown into prison for the rest of their lives for doing harmless drugs. People aren't rising up when people are being forced to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for violating some intellectual property law. That's some bullshit intellectual property law. These are tons of ways in which the government is stomping on our rights, and which the monopoly, which most of the people don't really care about, and yet they're not doing anything about it.
Yeah, because usually people think that the good of many people is more important than the good for one people. So you've seen, to go back to your example of Nazi Germany, the people thought that making all those people suffer will in the end make it better for them. So the good of many was more important than the good of the few. And that's an argument, I think, that is solely up to you, solely up to the individual inside to decide. Do you think that that's right, that the many should be more powerful than a single person or a smaller group? Or should everyone have their own right? And that's, I think, where the concept of anarchism comes into play. You think that everyone should have their own right to decide what is good for me is good for the society, right?
No, what I believe is that everyone should do what's best for them,
Yeah,
and other people don't know what's best for you. So therefore, I don't believe
exactly.
it's right for other people to choose what is best for you. Especially,
Exactly.
yeah.
My thinking is more like um, what is good for every single person doesn't have to be good for a society as a whole. If everyone gets like, I don't know, I'm hungry right now. If everyone gets a Big Mac, it's good for that person. But if everyone gets a Big Mac every day, it's bad for a society as a whole because you have illnesses spreading, you have diabetes going around and shit. So at some point, there must be someone telling people, yeah, that's bad for
Well,
you.
what if I'm okay with getting diabetes?
That's your
Should
decision.
I should the state come in and force me not to eat food because it's not good for me to
No,
get
but
diabetes?
it can tell you that it's bad for you, for example.
And they could tell me all I want, but it's my body, right?
Yeah.
All right.
And
So
in
then
a free
why should this
democratic
so what do
society,
you
you have to do what you want with your body in that sense.
Yeah, so if I work for a company and I don't want to give up any of my money to the state, then yeah, I shouldn't be forced to, right?
Mm, then we come back again to our social contract.
Okay, but your social contract then is okay with violating the property rights of innocent people.
Uh, because they no, because they are not rights. Usually, the state rights are something we made up. If there is no country, if there is no governing entity, you can't have a right. Because someone has to, for a right to exist, someone has to enforce it. Someone has to agree with it. If I say I have the right to that land, who is there to stop you from claiming, no, I have the right to that land?
I understand that, but yes, anyone could come up to you and violate your rights and harm you and kill you. But what I'm trying to say that is that it's always immoral for someone to do so, and the state is doing that, and and you support that.
It's not always immoral. Because, like I said, that's where we come with the individual view again. Because I think that even though taking the land of one person is immoral to that person, it is also more good for the society as a whole. Because by like you Americans like roads. Imagine if there needs to be a highway somewhere. You can't go around it, and the only property that's missing is like old Hankins' home. He has like 3 kilometers of a stretch of property, and you can't go around that. You can't go above it. You can't go below it. So, at what point? At some point, it would be necessary to just, for the good of the people, to just say, "Yeah, bro, we're gonna build a highway through there."
Yeah,
Because
so
many more people will profit from that than just the one old dude.
yeah, so I don't care if a lot of people are profiting. That doesn't give you the right to violate my right. Um, so, for instance, let's say that you're basically making a whole bunch of like utilitarian arguments, which is essentially the idea that, oh yeah, it may you may stealing this one thing from one person might harm that one person, but by giving it to a whole bunch of other people, then you're helping all those other people. So helping all of those other people, there's more utility in all those other people getting helped than that one person being harmed. So therefore, the utility outweighs the harm. But the issue
Exactly.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so the issue with that is most people who actually make a lot of these arguments don't actually consistently believe in it. So, for instance, let's say there's a beautiful utopia, and you know what a utopia is, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Okay. There's no problems, it's beautiful, no scarcity. But the only way in which you can uphold this utopia is by perpetually torturing a child in a basement um on into infinity. And if you stop torturing that child, well then the utopia will collapse, and it'll go back to a normal city. So do you think that we should torture that child?
If it's really a utopia, sure.
Yeah, so
Because I you didn't expect that, didn't you? Like, I am consistently with that. I
no, that's
think
fine. I just
that,
think it's funny. That's fine.
like I said, that's a individual thing for you to decide what you like. And in a free country, and go vote for that. There are, in theory, there are parties that that to support that. For Americans, there aren't, but in our system, there are. And
Oh yeah, there's a second part to this question.
yeah.
Okay, so the second part to this question is, okay, so like if you're okay with torturing one child, so where's the line at? Like, so for instance, if it's opposed to say one child, let's say it's like 10 children, would that change your matter? Would it make a difference?
At
Or
some
is it doesn't
point,
matter how many children as long as the utopia is going?
at some point, the number of the amount of suffering becomes too great. What
Okay,
exactly that number is, I cannot say.
so
But
so like it has
I
to, so what you're saying is the amount of torturing of the child, the utility in torturing those children, it doesn't matter how many of them, as long as the utility is outweighing the amount of children being tortured, then it's okay. Is that what you're saying? So like let's say like the utility is right here and then the torturing child harm is like right here. You would say still torture all the child even if it's like 200 children, so that we could keep the utopia. Fuck those 200 children, 3,000 children, whatever, how many children. As long as the utility is up here and the harm is over here, we're good to go, right?
basically, yeah. At some point, it would be yeah.
Oh man. So like it. So as long as the utility is if even if it's like 1,000 children, 1,000,000 children, you know what I mean?
You'd have to put the numbers of like people living in that utopia into aspect. Like,
Yeah.
of
Like,
course,
but as long as it's like I said, as long as it's above. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But as long as the utility is above the harm, it doesn't matter to you the amount of children that's being harmed. What matters to you is the utility, correct?
if you could quantify utility.
Yeah. Okay. So like, even if it was like, even if so, it's like it could be like millions of children, so long as the utility outweighs the harm.
For a million of children, you need like trillions of
It's a
people.
hypothetical. It's a hypothetical, obviously.
Yeah, but if you put big numbers on one side, you'd also have to think of a big number on the other side. Like, I, you always have to see the perspective of that.
No, I know. So like,
Of course, it's a very extreme example with torturing kids in
no,
your
all I'm
point of view.
doing with this is just seeing how far you're willing to take this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Yeah, and as long as you're consistent
long as
across the board.
yeah, as long as a society as a whole, is okay with that. They know that those kids are suffering, but they also know that they profit from, like, they it upholds their utopia. And if the alternative would be much worse, like, you go from a utopia to a dystopia. In that way, people would have much more motive to keep that system running.
Yeah. So a person like me, an anarcho-capitalist, would say, all of those children, all of those people whom are being tortured, all have self-ownership, which would mean that no person should ever have the right to initiate an aggression against any of those people for any reason, even if it means upholding some utopia. So if I decide, hey, I don't want to be tortured, that utopia collapsing, I would argue is not my responsibility. I'm not the one that caused that. All I'm doing is exercising my right to say no with the property that I own, because I believe in self-ownership, because I believe my body is my property. And you could take it like a lot of people, they'll be like, "Oh, well, let's say like a couple people die unless you pluck a hair from a person's head." But the issue with that is I'm never going to say that it's okay to initiate an aggression against another person in order to save another person. The reason why that is because those other people dying is never the responsibility of the person who decides not to initiate an aggression against another person. Whereas if you are initiating an aggression against another person in order to create some sort of utility, you are responsible for the violence that is being committed against that other person. So you are basically permitting violence against other people, whereas my system would never permit, or my ideology would never permit violence against another innocent person under any circumstance. Yeah, and that's just how we look at it. So yeah, I'm just gonna have to disagree with you on that one.
Yeah, but I do get your point. But I don't think it's realistic, because you say, well, you have a right to self-ownership, but then we go back to the point of who gives you that right, who enforces that right. You can have a gun, but if someone with 100 guns comes to your head, well, he can make your right disappear by just making you, by forcing you. You have either the choice to die and continue your right, or to just give up your right at that point.
I
It wouldn't
understand
be
that.
morally correct. It wouldn't be morally correct. It wouldn't be lawful. But in the end, they have more authority. They have more violence than you.
No, I understand that.
Uh,
But the issue is simply because somebody has the ability to violate my rights doesn't then give them the right to do so. Fundamentally, I believe that I have self-ownership because to not believe I have self-ownership, or for someone to not believe that they have self-ownership, would mean that they would believe that other people would then have the right to use their body without their consent. And I don't know anyone that actually believes that, hey, come on and use my body without my consent. You can use it whenever you want. But if they are agreeing to it, well, then it's not of without their consent. They're agreeing to it. So then, then that makes it okay. But if nobody's going to come out and say, yeah, you could use my body without my say so. So if you believe that you should have a right to stop other people from using your body without your say so, well, then you believe in self-ownership, because your body is a scarce resource. And you're saying that I ought to have the right to exclude other people from that scarce resource. So anyone who uses their body or in an aggression or an initiation of force against them stops other people or prevents other people from using their body without their consent, well, then they're basically saying that I am the owner of my body. And I believe that every person agrees to this to some degree, as so long as they're using their body. And so for instance, yeah, somebody could come up to me and stab me and harm me, but that's a completely separate thing from whether or not I have the right to stop that person. And I believe of course, I believe in self-ownership, which would mean that I have the right to stop that person from stabbing me, regardless of whether the state says so, whether the who says so. The state can have a law saying, hey, you have to allow people to stab you. Well, am I going to allow people to stab me now because the law says so? No. And fundamentally, I believe in self-ownership.
yeah, and you believe that. and I respect that.
Yeah. And we all believe
But
in it.
at the end, like I already said, that right is just something you believe in. And if I don't believe that you have the right to self-ownership and say there is no authority above us, we are just two people, or not two people, you are a single person, and I represent my company, Stabbing People Incorporated. We make money by stabbing people. People give us money for stabbing people. And I come up to you and I stab you. You can stab me, of course, but I have my 5 big bros next to me who are loyal to me. Who
Well,
can
hold on.
also
We don't need to go into
stab.
deep into this analogy. I get what you're trying to say. What you're saying is that people have the ability to commit aggressions against you, and that there's nothing you could say, oh, I have the right to do this, but it's not going to stop another person from initiating an aggression against you, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, I understand that, and I agree with you on that. We're both in agree with each other on that, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not the discussion that we're having here. We're having the discussion about ethics and whether or not people should have the right to do that, right?
Sure. In the end, it doesn't. It comes ethics. Ethics totally not. But ethics aren't set rules.
Hold on, hold on.
There are always.
We're talking
there are
about
always-
ethics, which means that we both believe in ethics, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But ethics are also something really subjective.
Yes, okay. So even if we're going to go based off of that, right? Let's just say it's morals are subjective, everything is subjective, right? We both believe in morals. We both believe in ethics, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So if somebody were to come up to you and try to stab you, right? You would not just let them stab you, right?
No.
Okay. So regardless of whether or not somebody has the ability to stab you, you still believe it's wrong to stab you, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so whether or not somebody has the ability to stab you doesn't matter now, right? Because you still think it's wrong for someone to stab you, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
If I didn't agree with that.
Okay, so therefore, when I'm saying, hey, I don't think it's right for the state to come in and forcefully extract wealth from me and rob me, and you say, oh, well, that's just how it is. That's just they could do it. What can you do about it? Well, let's say a larger company comes in and robs you. Da 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 da. Well, I'm gonna say, yeah, all of those things are bad. All of those things are immoral, right? All of those things are
Yeah.
bad. It's saying somebody's gonna murder me is not gonna change whether or not I think that's bad. Correct?
Yeah, but in the end, the state has the right to do that not because of a moral perspective, not of a ethical perspective, but of a much more realistic perspective that they can make you do that.
So okay, so but then you're going back. Okay, so then you believe that might makes right. So if somebody has the might to do something, then that makes it right.
Mm, in a sense, yes, in more broad sense, but not in a more concentrated sense. So if I have the might, if I have the strength to beat you up, that doesn't make it right. But
Okay, so then you don't believe in might
in
makes right.
in that in an individual way, not, but in a broad sense. So if a country is strong, they can make you do that just because you use their land. In the end, even though you say you own a plot of land, really the country owns it and just gives you the right to, in parentheses, own that land. You don't really own it. The country just gives you the right to say you own it.
Well, the thing is, I don't think a
And
country can own a land. I think only individuals can own land. A country is just a plot of land or a group of people, but a group of people can't own a whole land by them all simultaneously. You know, so in the event when you're talking about, oh, this country has the right to kick this person out, well, it's just like a country isn't a person. They're not the owners of that land, so no, they don't have the right to tell me to leave. The only person that would have the right to tell me to leave is a owner of that land, and the only way in which you could become an owner under the libertarian ethic is to basically is original appropriation, which would be mixing your land with the labor with the land, or through voluntary transaction. Those things are not things in which that's not how the state got its in possession of the products in which it's in possession of.
Yeah, but what stops someone from doing exactly that? You say it's not right to do so. So let's imagine
We're going back to this again.
Yeah.
Well, why?
Because
you've already agreed it doesn't matter.
What doesn't matter?
It doesn't matter if somebody, simply because somebody has the might to do something does not make it okay, correct?
In like I said, in an individual sense, not, but in a broad sense, yes.
Only individuals can do that.
A state is, in a sense, a individual. It's not a person, but it's a legal entity.
Yeah, that's not a person.
Just like a company is not a person, but it's still an entity. It still acts as one thing.
So wait, if you're living in a country and that the leaders decide to invade another country or do something fucked up, and then other countries invade you, you're responsible for that?
No, your government is, and the government.
So then,
the country is represented through the government, but in a sense, builds still a single entity that owns your land in that sense.
Yeah, but how did they come to own that land?
Through laws.
Through laws? So they just came in and said, hey, we are now the owners.
Laws. They had a monopoly on violence.
So they were a criminal organization. They came in and they said, hey, we're taking over this land. This is now ours.
Depends on how you define criminal. Because
a person that violates the rights of an innocent person by initiating an aggression against them.
Then it's again the question: what is a right? You only have a right.
A right is an action that ought not be impeded.
Yeah, but who gives you that right? If there is no one to give you a right, then you don't have a right. You can have a right to say, yeah, I give myself that right, but who has to respect that in the end?
Yeah, again, I agree that somebody has the, again, I don't know why I have to continue repeating this to you because it's kind of weird, but I agree that somebody has the ability to violate my rights, but that doesn't change whether or not that's right or wrong. I could say I have the right to do this all I want. I believe that rights, and I can even grant to you, hey, that rights come from us people who sort of come together and agree on it. And, whether or not other person agrees to it or not agrees to it, it depends on the person. But that doesn't change whether or not whether or not I'm right or whether I'm not wrong on my ethical viewpoint. So I don't believe that you're right in your ethical viewpoints because you're saying basically, hey, there's this big group of people who are basically saying, hey, we have a monopoly on force and we're going to claim this land and force everybody in there to pay into our system. And I think that's just immoral. If what if those people don't want to pay into that system?
Well, they have to. They are made to.
Yeah, and that's what you support.
Then we are back.
But is that what you support?
Yeah.
Okay. Got you.
I think that if there is an entity that I think cares for it, people, or that is a good thing. that they have the right to extract taxes from you, that they have the right to imprison you if they think you have done something wrong. Then we are back to there are good states and there are bad states. There are states that truly use their exploited money for good. You see it in the Nordic states. People are living good lives there. But there are also states that do it bad. You see it in North Korea, you see it in China. You've seen it historically in all the Eastern Bloc countries. So there are both sides to that spectrum. And I believe as long as a country is on the erring side, and the people can decide to overthrow their country, the people have the ability to do that, that makes it right.
Okay. So
Because
basically,
then we are
oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
then we are back at the utilitarian viewpoint. The good of the many makes more than the bad of the one.
Okay. So you agree with me that a group of people that forcefully take stuff from other people, you know, that's a criminal organization. If a private company were to go up to a group of people and or a person and steal their cell phone, or that would make them a criminal organization.
A criminal organization by a law that a country has given
Yeah.
them.
So,
If
but
there
if
is
the
no
state
law,
does it, it's okay.
because the state makes the laws. The one
Yeah.
who makes the laws can say what is right or what is wrong in their own controlled territory.
So when if
Just
a
so,
normal person robs somebody, it's okay.
may I?
It's
May
not
I?
okay. But when
May
sorry, go ahead.
I? You work at a company, right?
Yeah.
I don't think you're self-employed. Should you have the right to go nude and talk to your secretary about wanting to abuse her?
What kind of question is that? Probably not. No.
Yeah, no. But imagine you think that's right. You think that is your moral standpoint. Yeah, I can do that. I have the right. Then the company can still fire you. The company can still sue you for sexual harassment. And they have the right to do that because you are an employee by the by the company. Just so as a inhabitant of a country is in a way an employee of the country in a more theoretical way. I don't want to argue if they are really an employee or not, but you get my point.
I get
You
your point.
basically belong to that country.
I would
You
disagree, but
have
I get
this
what you're saying. You're saying I
you
am a
have the
slave.
citizenship.
I am a slave to the state, basically.
Uh, Depends on how you define slavery, but yeah. In a broader sense, you are involuntarily a part of the country
Yeah.
because you are born involuntarily. You are alive involuntarily as long as you don't commit suicide. Because no one asked you to be born.
Yeah, so the thing is, again, like if somebody, again, like I was saying earlier, somebody could just come up to you and forcefully do things to you and do bad things to you. Um, but if you disagree with, obviously, me and you both agree with that. I'm only putting out moral arguments here. If you disagree with my moral arguments or think that my moral arguments that I'm making are wrong, well, then you could tell
No,
me that.
I
But
get
so
you.
far
I
in
get
this
you more.
conversation, it's hold on. Let me finish.
Yeah.
So far in this
Sorry.
conversation, it seems that you agree with me on most of my arguments on my ethics, which is that it's wrong to steal from people. It's any person that takes another from another person unconsensually is a part of a criminal or is a criminal. Um, and yet, but then when I bring it to the state, somehow the state is okay. Um, so I just feel like that's just a little bit inconsistent.
it's not inconsistent, like I said, because I think that the state usually brings more good than bad. And morals aren't to me, it's not something, if it's in case A good, and then it has to be good in every case. Every situation has its own uh, um, moral compass. Every situation has its own weight to it. And I think you should be able to differentiate. In one situation, hitting someone is good. In one situation, hitting someone is bad. I should have done that differently around. So usually it's bad, but sometimes it could be good. Morally, lawfully, maybe not every time, but if I see a woman getting beat up, and the only way to stop that is to beat up the person beating her up, then morally, I think we can both agree that I am right to beat that dude up. But usually, if I just go to some random dude up and beat him up, that's morally bad.
No, I get what you're
It's
saying.
really situational. And so are the morals we discussed situational. If I do that, it's morally bad. But if someone or some entity, in my case your state, comes in, it is morally not good, but okay, because usually they have a broader sense to it.
Yeah,
Because
so it seems to me. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. What you say? What you just
usually
said?
they have the good of the people, and the people vote for that in a free country.
Got you. So I feel like you're kind of defaulting to the utilitarian argument, which is essentially like it doesn't matter if it's inconsistent in that way, because it's not really inconsistent to the utilitarian argument, which would essentially be because the state, even though the state is robbing other people, the utility in having the state as opposed to not having the state would be higher than not having the state. So therefore, it's not inconsistent. Is that basically your argument?
My argument is that morals are situational, and in all other points,
Like if the
that it,
utility is higher for having the state, which you view, that's how you look at it, then not having the state, then yeah, the state is okay to violate some people's rights because by not having it, we'd be worse off from your viewpoint, essentially.
I don't want to open the case with the what is a right again. But
No,
yeah,
we don't. I'm gonna move on after this. Don't worry. So
yeah,
yeah, you can just give me a quick yes or no, and then I'll move on.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, the only last question that I would have for like the utilitarian thing is, and this is just going to be a yes or no question, and we don't have to go any deeper in it. But I usually ask people who make these arguments. So let's say like there's a guy who comes up to you and says, "Hey, I'm gonna rape you, and if you don't let me rape you, I'm gonna rape 5 other people." Would you say you're obligated to get raped in order to stop those 5 other people to get from getting raped?
That's a trolley problem.
Well, yeah, but it goes into like utility.
Mm, in a sense, that depends really on the situation. In a broader sense, yeah, you should, because you help more people by allowing it. But if you put it in an individual sense, then no. That's like again the case you have to differentiate in individual or group.
Got
In a
you.
group sense, you definitely should let them rape you because
Because
more people.
in a group, the utility function would be different than like an isolated group.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So, no, I get what you're trying to say. So you're saying like obviously it would benefit the whole if there's more people than like in a group situation than like a one person raping another person. So
yeah,
because there's more people involved, it kind of changes the situation.
yeah.
Yeah. Don't worry. I'm not trying to like take you out of context or anything like that. Um so No, like how a libertarian would, I guess, would look at that is that I would say no. And the reason why is because, and my justification for that would be, um, that person deciding to coming up to me and saying, "Hey, I'm going to rape 5 other people." If I refuse them my body, I'm not making them do that. They're choosing to go do that. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not responsible for them doing that. So yeah, I have the right to refuse my body to that person, regardless of what they choose to do afterwards. And the reason why that is because I am not responsible for what they do afterwards, because I'm not making the decision for them. They are the one making the decision for themselves. But that's it.
Mhm.
Now I just want to quickly go over the ECP. Um, is that okay with you?
ECP?
Yeah.
What it
The economic
stand for?
calculation problem. That was what my YouTube
Yeah.
video was about.
Yeah. Sure.
So you said that you believe that the economic calculation problem is solvable. Like, what was your arguments for it?
Um, I had many things. I don't think that a centrally planned economy is possible. We saw it in the Eastern Bloc, but not successfully possible. It is possible to do, but not to be successful in.
Yeah, it's not going to be
That is
efficient.
my stand. Yeah, it's not
Okay.
going to be efficient, but it is a possibility to do it.
Well, how about this? Let me go over what the argument I was making in my video, and then you tell me like if you agree or disagree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That's better, I think.
Yeah, so basically the argument that I was making in my video is without private property and the means of production, there's no way of trading. There's no trading going on between people who are facing the scarcity of the goods and services in which they own. So without that, you don't have prices, and without prices, you can't really tell what people want. So, for instance, when you go to a store, you know, the question a lot of people think is like, how do people know who are the store owners know what people want and for at what quantity? And the reason why they know is because they have prices. So when they put something forward, like say like a bag of chips for like $2, right? If a lot of people buy it out, well, that means that shows to the person who is selling that thing that a lot of people like that thing, and if not a lot of people are buying it or at the given price, well, then that shows that not a lot of people really like that thing at that given price. So they either need to adjust the price by either lowering it, or lowering it, or raising it up in order to sort of meet the supply and demand of the situation. And based on that information, it allows basically people who are selling goods and services to know what people want for how much and yada yada. And without that information, without prices, you can't really know what people want. And that's sort of the issue with like the Eastern Bloc and a lot of like the USSR and a lot of these command economies was that they had a lot of the reason why they had a lot of inefficiencies was because they had people at the top basically choosing what goes where and what prices where things should be at. So for instance, they'll be like, hey, this thing needs to be at this price, this thing needs to be at this price. Now, the problem with fake prices or arbitrary prices is that, well, they're arbitrary and they don't actually reflect the supply and demand of that good and services, because prices are not these arbitrary numbers in which shopkeepers slap onto these goods. They can't just slap any number that they want on it. It has to reflect the scarcity of that situation, because if not, no one's going to buy it at that given price. Whereas if you are in a command economy and you're setting prices based on what you think it is, you're doing it based on what you think it is, or maybe the meager information that you're getting from the people who are around you. No people or group of people, even if you got the most smartest mathematicians, the most 100, 200 IQ people in the world, the best IQ economists in the world together to try to coordinate what people want for how much and where every individual thing, innumerable thing to go to each little place, like it's quite literally impossible that they couldn't do it.
And I agree.
Okay.
I already said I don't think that it is efficiently possible, but I have to disagree with your with some little aspects. It's also in my comment. It wasn't a big disagreement on your standpoint. Just some aspects of it, like in a centrally planned economy, you said there is no property rights, there is no individual ownership, but in a central economy, there can be. No one says that a central planned economy has to be a communist economy. Like I pointed out in my comment, Nazi Germany had some central planning aspects. They said we want that and that and that product to be done at that price at that time. That is an essentially centrally planned economy. They don't own the means of production. They just tell the companies, you have to do that. And they have to comply, because otherwise we go back to the force argument and shit. But they still own their stuff. They still own their workforce. Own in parentheses. But they are just required to do those quotas, to do those prices.
No, I get what you're saying, but the problem is that when the state comes in and tells a business owner how much they could create, what prices they could choose, what this they can do, they are essentially controlling that business. They are essentially taking ownership over that business, because if the business owner was the owner of their business, well, then they would be allowed to set the price at whatever they want. And that's sort of the issue with the command economy. Yeah, on paper, you may be the owner, but the state is coming in and redirecting all of the scarce resources, telling you how much you can sell it, where it goes, who it goes to. They're essentially taking control or taking ownership of these goods and services. So, yeah, that's fundamentally, ownership is the right to control a scarce resource. And if at any point the government could come up to you and take that thing from you, or tell you what you can do with it, well, then they're essentially taking ownership over it, even if you have some rights to do some things with it. Ownership isn't you have the right to do some things with some things that you own. Well, no, ownership is the right to control a scarce resource. If you don't have that right, well, then somebody is inhibiting you from doing what you want with that thing. Well, then they're taking control. They are claiming ownership over it. And again, the reason why a lot of these economies eventually fall apart is because those people who are at the top, unlike a business, these businesses aren't slapping arbitrary prices on these goods. It's reflecting the goods and services. It's reflecting the supply and demand of the goods and services being sold. And if they are wrong or make a mistake or just arbitrarily put numbers on there, well, then they'll go out of business and they will fail. Whereas a person at the top, they are going based off of what they think people want. There's no prices to give them the signals that show what people want. And that's why it's just so inefficient. It's just essentially, and even so what they tried to do was like with polls or surveys. Some people say, oh, we could fix this with AI, but none of this stuff can do what prices do naturally in the market.
You basically said two big arguments, like the ownership thing.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. In a more theoretical way, yeah, of course. In that moment, the state or whoever is the controlling entity theoretically owns it, but it more controls it. To me. And what was your last point? Your last sentence?
Oh, and I was just adding more arguments to the why it would be more inefficient.
But there was, and the calculation thing there.
Oh yeah.
You can still know that you have still numbers. You still see your stocks. Like, oh, in this month, 90% of our bread was sold. So maybe we should plan next month more. Like I said, I don't think that is a good system. but it is possible in that way. How you make it, you basically say, yeah, no, without someone setting a price, without the prices changing dynamically, you can't know how much people want it. But you can definitely know how much people want it, because you see historical data. And that is the thing with partially planned economies, that some things you can plan for. So car ownership, or some seasonal produce, that's basically around about the same demand every year to the same time. So in theory, you could plan for that. You couldn't have a surplus in stuff. So if more people want it than usually, then you run into a problem, and that's where we get the free market economy argument again, which I more agree with. But it is
Listen,
definitely possible to plan for that.
I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible as in people can't try to do it. What I'm saying is it's impossible for it to ever be as efficient as the free market, or more
Yeah,
efficient than the
and I
free
agree
market.
with that.
Yeah,
I
it's
agree with that.
impossible. It could never be like a lot of socialists, they make the claim that socialism is better than capitalism. It's more efficient than capitalism. It'll bring more prosperity than capitalism. But that's just impossible. It's impossible for yeah, it is. Yeah, and those and so for instance, the point that you made earlier, say like something gets sold out at the given price, a price coordinator can see that, and then they could eventually change. But they're not just dealing with one price for one good, right? They're dealing with millions and millions of prices for millions and millions of goods across hundreds, which have all hundreds of
Yep.
different varieties of size and this and this and that. Whereas a business owner, when they see something sell out, with the person who was running that, they can just change the price right on the spot and adjust according to the market needs. Whereas under like a centrally planned economy, you can't do that. It's based on what the people at the top think is the best. You know what I'm saying? And so if you see something sell out, you then have to go to either price coordinator and ask them permission. And then if they say yes, or whether or not they say no based on their information, it really just, it adds all these extra steps to something that should be very simple. If something gets sold out, oh well, then the person who's selling it, they could say, hey, we can they could adjust the price in order to meet the supply and the demand. Whereas on a command economy, it doesn't work that way.
And I agree with that. But I like I always said, I don't really agree in the way you talk about it. Like, to me as a listener, it really sounds like you say it in the video more. It sounds like an impossibility, and that was what I critiqued at that.
No, I'm not
Not
saying that it's not
not
impossible
yeah.
to
No, no, no,
try
no, no,
it.
no. Please,
Sorry.
please. You don't, in your video, you don't say that it's less efficient. You say that it is not possible, and that's the argument I'm making. It is possible. It is bad. It is inefficient as hell. We both agree with that, and we both agree with that is still possible. I just had an issue with your way of talking about it, and but I think
Okay, that's a
I
good
get your
criticism.
point now. Yeah.
No, I get your criticism. So if I guess if I'm going to clarify, and that's an okay criticism. If I could clarify what I meant by impossible, when I say it's impossible to coordinate an economy with a one mind, one group or group of people, for them to coordinate an economy without prices and be as efficient as a capitalist economy without those prices. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Definitely.
literally impossible. They don't have it's impossible because they don't have the information. It's never going to be as efficient as as a capitalist market. They could try it. Like anyone could try to make a socialist market, right? But it's always going to fall apart. It's always going to lead to less efficiency, and it's always going
Mhm.
to lead to death and starvation.
Mm, mm, mm. That's the issue. The other issue It is not a socialist market. It is a centrally planned market. Socialism is not central planning. Those are two different things. Like I also said in my comment, many, and I think historically, basically all so-called socialist countries used central planning, but it is not a thing that is inherently a part of socialism. It is just a thing that is a very handy tool to get socialism. I think it is important to make that distinction, just as a wheel is not inherently a part of a car. You can have a car without a wheel. Then you'd have like a tank or something, tank drive, with chains and stuff. But it is a very handy tool to have in a car. Is what I'm saying.
No, I get what you're saying. When I say central control over the state, well, when you talk to most socialists believe in collectivizing the
and
means.
most socialists are wrong in that point.
Hold on. Let me finish, and then you tell me why I'm wrong afterward. You're good.
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say that most socialists believe in centralized control over the means of production, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I may be wrong on that, but from what I hear from most socialists, and from Marx and all these guys, they believe in centralized control over the means of production. So, when my thing is just like the only real possible way for you to have that is for you to sort of like forcefully take the wealth from people and put it into a commons and have it distributed based on, someone's needs, and someone's going to have to do that. So I feel like, people could say, oh, it's not this way, but inevitably it's the way that I view it. It's inevitably always going to be that way, because I can't see any other way of doing it that doesn't end up in that way. It doesn't have to be necessarily a state, like in the sense but I don't see it done in any way that doesn't require some sort of force, because people aren't just going to give up their stuff.
Wait, someone dropped. I think you misunderstand Marx in that way. Marx was Marx ideology was, in a sense, an ideology in the purest sense. He said himself that it is not possible to do, and he didn't advocate for a central authority. Marx's plan was that every company is owned by the people that run the company. So if I have a sawmill, I don't have the sawmill. The workers have that specific sawmill.
Yeah, but isn't that centralized control? Like, that's
no, because the workers themselves decide the prices for the products they sell.
Yeah, but it's not individually owned.
It is owned by these specific workers. A different sawmill will be owned by different people.
No, I understand that, but what I'm saying is it's not owned. It's owned collectively. It's not owned by one person.
Yeah, it is owned collectively by the people that
and that group, right, gets to decide. That entity decides what happens, regardless of the owner's say.
Yeah. That is the big difference between capitalism and communism.
Yeah, so they're centrally controlling.
May I?
Sorry.
In capitalism, one person basically owns the company, or a group of higher ups, and in communism, the workers own the company. I dropped something again. I don't agree with the communism in that broad sense. And Marx also said it isn't possible to do realistically. But that is the big difference and the core ideology behind that. And many people, and you also said it, most socialists, so-called socialists, get that wrong. They completely misunderstand that aspect, and I agree with your point of view more on
So it
some
seems we're in
things.
agreement, man.
Yeah,
So you're the good
but
socialist. All these other socialists, they're just
I am not a socialist. Like I said, I am not a socialist.
okay. So you got the right
I
idea. All these other guys, they
no,
don't know what they're talking
I
about.
no. I think they mix up a ideology with something that is realistic.
Okay.
I see it. I see it in the people I study with. They have all those ideas, and I think some of them are pretty good, but they don't realize that those are just ideas and not really possible
Mhm.
uh,
In the real world.
in the real world. Just like communism, it is not really possible in the real world. Just like an efficient central planned economy, it is not really possible in the real world.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I talk about collectivism, collectivism is single entity. What I mean by that is one group. It could be either. It doesn't necessarily has to be one person. It could be one group. Um, but basically, they are taking control over, a large section of the economy, whether it's one company or multiple companies, and this group or person is, directing the economy. It isn't like a situation where, oh, I give you this for this, for that, for this. It's somebody or a group at the top, whether it be workers or Stalin or Mao or whatever, whomever it is, you know,
Yeah.
um, those people are the ones that are basically controlling the economy. And I don't believe any group or person should control the economy. I think each individual should control themselves and do what they want with their own property. And when we do that, well, not only are we better off, but we're not violating each other's rights and we're not harming each other. It's better to cooperate with each other because there's less death, there's more wealth to be had. There's just much better world.
Yeah, but I will disagree with you on not your last point, but on the fact that if a company is owned by the people that work at that company, I don't think they control the economy. What is the difference? Imagine today's world, but every CEO
Oh, I didn't
is
say that. I didn't say
but
that.
every CEO.
I
You
didn't.
said that a corporate that communal ownership makes a central planned economy in
No,
how
I
I
mean, if you're
understand.
talking about one specific company, they're not taking over the economy. I'm talking
Yeah,
about, yeah,
and
centrally
that is
central control over the economy.
yeah,
Yeah, that's what I'm
and
criticizing, and that's what most people consider to be socialism. A lot of people consider it to be socialism. Now, I understand that you don't consider that to be socialism, and that's fine.
because it isn't.
I
Because
and that's
it
fine.
objectively isn't. I studied that. That is my field of study.
Okay,
I in the most theoretical sense, in the historical sense, how Marx described it, how the people after him described it, that is never what they meant.
mhm,
And that is never how they thought about it.
gotcha.
Um, so if people say, yeah, socialism is a central planned economy, that is just factual wrong.
Okay.
So,
Anyways,
and
yeah. So when it comes to individual companies, you know, as long as it's like I'm not against like workers cooperatives or anything like that. You know what I mean? Like as long as it's uh what you call it, voluntary, you know, I don't have any problem with the workers coming together and, you know, pulling their money to try to create something together. However a co-op works, as long as it's voluntary, I don't really care. I wouldn't
yeah,
consider that to be socialism. In fact, I would consider that to be just capitalism, because capitalism to me is just free markets. It's just people exchanging goods and services that they are the owners of.
But that would be free markets. Capitalism and communism is like I said, who owns the companies that produce those goods? In a more ideology pure way, the difference between capitalism is that the capital owns the company. So the person who controls the capital controls the company. That's where the capitalism comes from, that the CEO owns the company.
Yeah, but I agree with
that. Communism is the people own that. You can have in our sense, capitalist economy with a communist form of ownership. Capitalism versus communism is more like the ownership, and the economy is somehow mixed up with the capitalism definition. So you get what I'm saying?
Capitalism. I look at capitalism like free as free markets and private property, and it also has to do with private property too, because you can't really have a free market without private property ownership. Now you can, if you're in a commune and you decide to run, and you are the owner of that land, you decide to run it communistically. As long as no one's being coerced, then that's fine. Yeah, I don't have a problem. We don't, us anarcho-capitalists don't have a, we would consider that to be capitalism, because that's just people freely doing what they want.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And we agree on that point.
Yeah.
And that's like I said, I just came on here to understand your viewpoints, because I think it's an interesting viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree with it. I think that's clear.
Yeah.
But I still think it's a valid viewpoint. I think you of all people agree with that. Everyone is an individual and has the individual right to have their own viewpoint, to have their own ideology. And I think that's good.
Of course.
And I think
I had fun.
We should also do much more to understand those people, those different viewpoints. And that's why I came on here, because I want to understand you.
Well, do you feel like I did a good job of helping you understand, or like how do you think
I think I understand your viewpoint more. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's
like
good.
Like I said, I don't really disagree with all of it. But I think it made clear what your viewpoint is, and me it really helped.
All right. Any last points you want to make before we split up?
Not really. Don't call me a socialist, communist, or something in any title of YouTube. That would be my only request.
No, I'm just calling this discussion about anarcho-capitalism. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
Yeah. I had fun. It was a good conversation.
It was.
Yeah. And I'll see you next time, man. Have a good night, man.
Yeah, see ya. Good night.
All right, that was fun. Oh, where's my camera? All right, guys. That was a fun discussion. I feel like I definitely won that. What do you guys think? But that's just me. But it was fun. So I gotta go. I'll see you guys.